All right, good morning and welcome to our online webinar, The Journey to Starting a Career in Entrepreneurship. My name is Sarah Haffenden and I'm the Marketing Communications Manager at UKZN Extended Learning, also known as UEL. So in case you are unfamiliar with UEL, we are the continuing education unit of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and we offer all of the short courses on behalf of the university. So we introduced these webinars as we were in full support and compliance with the directive of the national lockdown, which was issued to address the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to embrace the changes, we launched a number of projects aimed at providing free access to learning materials during lockdown. So one of these projects is our online learning webinars. Our webinars will continue throughout August and September and will be offered once a week on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. But please do take a look at the final slide at the end of this webinar for further details on upcoming webinars, or you can visit our website at www.ukznextendedlearning.com. Please note that due to the nature of this webinar, we will be unable to address raised hands and questions throughout the presentation. So please would you post all your comments and the questions in the Q&A box, and these will be addressed at the end of the webinar. So we'll also allow for live questions at the end. If you would like to ask your question live, just raise your hand and we'll open up your mic so that you can ask your question then. So I'd now like to introduce you to our guest speaker for today, Vani Mudley. So Vani is the Chief Executive at Vani Mudley and Associates, a global entrepreneurship, leadership, and management development company in business for 14 years. With 28 years of experience in the small, micro, medium enterprise development sector, organizational development, management, and leadership sectors, Vani has designed training models, manuals, trained, mentored, coached, and interacted with women, youth, and men in urban and rural areas in business, in federations, corporate, and government. From the rural to the boardroom, she has trained and consulted as an internationally accredited trainer of trainers on entrepreneurship and leadership using the CEFE, which is the content, competent, com- competencies, sorry about that, based economics formation of enterprises model as a basis. She has visited, trained, conducted study tours, researched, and understood best practice models in 26 different countries. She is a founder, member, and chairman of Women Building Over Africa, a financial services primary cooperative recently licensed by the Reserve Bank of South Africa. The purpose of this institution is to facilitate the financial environment for the economic freedom of women. So welcome, Vani, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. A very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. Women's Day greetings in the month of Women's Day to all the women. I think it is very appropriate that we do have starting a career in entrepreneurship in Women's Month. And I think in the context of the broader impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, where there are so many job losses, people are being put on short time, that you are already thinking about ways in which to generate some form of income in the near future due to the situation or context that we find ourselves in. So I want to just acknowledge people on here who are my clients. We have people who are starting out businesses, people who are already in business. So I'm going to try and whet your appetite for small business development, starting a career or enhancing your career in entrepreneurship through the types of information, through the information that we're going to be sharing with you this morning. So the question always begs, and it's an age-old rhetoric: are entrepreneurs born or made? Although there is scientific evidence that shows that certain traits are more inclined to entrepreneurship, can be passed down through genetics, no one's really convinced that an entrepreneur gene exists. It is a number of factors, including the experience that you have, the environment that you're exposed to as you're growing up, your upbringing, and sometimes genetics that does contribute to creating entrepreneurial competencies. So if we look at personal entrepreneurial competencies of an entrepreneur, you may recognize some of this as inherent characteristics that you already have. So the way in which we basically bring about awareness on entrepreneurial competencies is through various tools. And one critical tool is called the PICS tool, which basically asks you specific questions that would lead us to establishing your level of opportunity seeking, persistence, risk taking, setting goals and basically reaching them, seeking information, conducting research to get into the depths of what you're trying to get going or create. Self-confidence, and I think you must know that this is a critical component or competence of entrepreneurs. Resilience, and I think there's no other or better time to describe the concept of resilience as the one that we find ourselves currently, because to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic and the environment that it has presented requires resilience in abundance. Commitment to work contract. Are you committed to getting a contract and delivering to perfection at a high quality level? Inherent competence of an entrepreneur. Demand for quality and efficiency, and this should be one of the key priorities. Systematic planning and monitoring. Everything you plan, everything you implement has to be systematic and must be monitored through a very structured process. Do you have persuasion skills? Do you have networking skills? Or do you prefer to basically sit behind a computer and expect business to come your way? These are some of the realities in terms of entrepreneurial competencies that really move people from where they are to the next level. So if you look at the entrepreneurial competencies, it starts with the self. And that's why we should always be in touch with who am I really? Is there an assumption about who I am? And how is that being portrayed to people that I interact with? Do I understand myself? Or every time I open my mouth, do I come across as a flaming dragon to people wanting to facilitate them to turn and run away as fast as they possibly can? Do I understand others? Or as I turn around, they're ready to throw swords at my back? So the question is, who am I really? And this is a critical component. We need to understand who we are, what we want to do, and why we want to achieve what we want to achieve. That is a very critical issue to commence with. And it is also a critical issue because we need to understand how we come across to other people. So here we have our plans. We think starting a journey in entrepreneurship, or any journey for that matter, is smooth sailing. It's a straight line, straight road to reach the goalpost. Truth be told, the universe has different plans for you. You're going to come across ditches and boulders, you're going to have to build ladders across, you're going to have to build zip lines or build a boat. And just when you think you've settled, you encounter another storm and it's another uphill battle. So this is the constant life of an entrepreneur. And it's important for us to be aware of this and be ready for this when we embark on a career in entrepreneurship. Resilience, as I indicated to you, is the key component. So if you look at this tree, it is actually a picture I took at a game reserve a few years ago. And I was just so intrigued by the way in which the roots, due to the rock preventing the penetration of the roots into the soil, which is a natural phenomenon, it actually grew around the rock to find the soil and then dig deep in. And as a result of all of that, some leaves have sprouted, or the tree is getting or achieving new life from the expanded root. Very interesting, isn't that so? And I think there's so many lessons from nature that we can learn and apply in our everyday life. And if you look at animal behavior, animal habitats, if you look at it in general, there's absolutely incredible leadership and entrepreneurship lessons that we can learn. So usually when we're thinking of a career in entrepreneurship, the question we constantly ask ourselves is, where do I start? I've got millions of ideas are just generating from my brain, and I have absolutely no clue as to where I'm going to start. So we basically say we need to go through, firstly, a brainstorming process. We need to document these ideas. We need to also think out of the box. Market research is key in finalizing your business idea and concept. You may assume that the market needs a certain product or service, but the reality after conducting market research or a market study may be completely different. Why do we encourage you to think out of the box? There's a lot of supplies in the catering sector, in the clothing manufacturing sector, for example, which is actually a dying sector, clothing and textile, to a large extent. But even the players with extensive experience in that particular space are struggling with the global markets, flooding the South African market with textiles and clothes at a far lower price than we can produce at within South Africa. Remember, one of our challenges in South Africa is the cost of labor. If you compare us to the East, for example, you would find that the cost of labor is far lower. And, you know, as part of my travels, I got to engage with ambassadors or high commissioners. And one of the key questions I've asked high commissioners in the East is it true that people are underpaid? Hence, your cost of production is lower. And the response was absolutely not. They receive market-related rates, and the cutting-edge technology is actually key to the low cost of production. So it makes us go back into the drawing room, isn't that so, in terms of access to technology, being able to produce quicker, faster, more cost-effective, with low wastage. So if you look at these pictures, we generally know watermelons to be rectangular in shape. Here they are producing square watermelons in Japan. What do you think they sell for? They actually sell for $100 US. Who's going to buy it? Because that's the next question, isn't that so, when you're thinking of a business concept or a business idea? It would certainly be the higher income earners, the elites. They would basically want to socialize and have a square watermelon on the dinner table, or, you know, it could be a topic of conversation. A wine bottle, who's going to buy that? Wine connoisseurs pay thousands of rands for a good bottle of wine. This intriguing concept of growing a pear in a wine bottle could be absolutely amazing. This is done currently in Brazil. Out of the box, very different, entering into a niche market, creating a new demand in the marketplace. Very interesting. So do you have hundreds of business ideas and not know what to do next? So it's very important that you determine the why. Once we're done with this webinar, I want you to download a YouTube video clip put together by Simon Sinek. It's called The Golden Circle, or The Power of Why. So he says, you may think you've thought up an awesome idea, but your business won't be successful if you don't know the real reasons behind why it's a good solution and whom it would be a good solution for. So it's important that we identify the core purpose of the business, why that product or service. Generally, when we get into business, our focus is purely on what are we going to sell? What are we going to sell? Who are we going to sell it to? It's not why are we wanting to put that product together and introduce it to the marketplace. So let me just give you a few examples. If you heard Martin Luther King, did he say, I want to promote passive resistance or nonviolence? He said, I have a dream. And people bought into that dream. They didn't buy into the concept of nonviolence. So if you look at Apple, for example, and if we had to start with the why with Apple before we go to the how and the what, they would perhaps say, everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. How do we do this? The way in which we do this is that we challenge the status quo by making our products in beautiful design, simple to use, and user-friendly. What do you sell? We just happen to make the best computers. So can you see the impact of that? Rather than going to somebody and saying, I have an Apple computer to sell you, they actually start with, why am I selling computers in the first instance? So if you look at a company, and I actually did some training for this company called Johnson Matthey, and I got to meet the executives before my presentation. And of course, when they came on board, the first thing they said was, we apply unrivaled scientific expertise to enable cleaner air, improved health, and more efficient use of the planet's resources. But what do they produce? They actually produce emission control catalysts for motor vehicles. It's a little part made out of diamond and platinum and a whole range of other types of metal. And it's inserted on the exhaust to clean the air. And I want to repeat their tagline. It's not, we produce catalysts for motor vehicles to control emissions. They basically say, we apply unrivaled scientific expertise to enable cleaner air, improved health, and more efficient use of the planet's resources. Do they say what they're selling? No, that's not their starting point. It's why they're selling it. And that's what sells. So let's look at the next question. What problem does your business idea solve? Your business may solve a problem for you, but does it solve a problem for others? If nobody else has the problem that you have, that your business proposes a solution for, then who will buy that solution? Nobody, right? So after you've taken a deep dive into why your business is needed in the first place, it's important to determine who will be the target audience of your business. Whilst preparing for this particular presentation, that was my key issue. Who am I preparing this presentation for? The topic suggests that I'm preparing the presentation for people who are considering entrepreneurship as a career, and I'm to give them an orientation as to what that journey would look like going forward. The other, when I started interacting with people, was that my existing entrepreneurs were quite keen to come on board and just go through this whole refresher about the whole journey, although they've experienced the journey already. So they could add a lot of value to this as well. So I had to make sure that the presentation actually appeals to varying target markets based on the type of interaction I had with people around the hosting of this webinar. So think demographics of target audience. What's important to these people and how will you reach them? Remember, you reach them by capturing their attention, by giving them the information that they require. So here we are, we find ourselves in an economic environment where we are dealing with the repercussions and the impact of a pandemic called COVID-19. And according to Developing Leaders in a VUCA Environment, by the UNC Executive Development, they came up with a concept called VUCA. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I said, well, in South Africa, we have a concept called VUCA, and that means wake up, get up. So VUCA in this context is predominant in today's business world. It's the new normal, and it is changing not only how organizations operate, but how business, government, and community leaders lead. And I'm sure you've heard from existing entrepreneurs exactly what kind of challenges they are experiencing. Many of them are facing short time, perhaps retrenchments. Most of them are generating between 30 to 55% of their total revenue per annum or per month. So it is a real tough time, and they are being challenged with debt, limited markets, limited sales. And whilst all of this is happening, there's actually a presentation of a whole new range of opportunities, especially in PPE, or what is required to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic. So most of our entrepreneurs in the clothing manufacturing space have actually converted their business to focus predominantly on producing masks. Those in the production space have diversified to produce hand sanitizers and so on. So we find that there is this complete shift in terms of focus, and many have diversified their businesses as well. Engineering companies have moved into trading and trading masks. Construction companies have done the same because these particular industries have felt the pinch of the COVID-19 pandemic. So how we lead in a VUCA environment is we have to become more strategic. We have to engage in more complex critical thinking, which is required at business level, government leader level, and community leader level. In today's VUCA environment, the choice of leaders will have to be premised on how they are able to withstand the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment with vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. To be a good entrepreneur, agility is the key. You must be able to be agile enough in order to move and change, diversify your business based on the economic environment in which you find yourself. So let's look at the forecast in terms of economic growth for South Africa. And I think we all know that there is a major decline in the gross domestic product. For those of you who don't understand the concept of gross domestic product, it means all the goods and services produced in an economic environment in a given year. So we usually talk about the GDP per annum, and we sometimes monitor the GDP growth on a month-to-month basis. Usually it is the receiver of revenue or the South African Bureau of Statistics that basically monitor the GDP growth. So according to these projections by economists and National Treasury as basically put together this forecast, the economy will decline or has declined in the process of declining by minus 7.2% in 2020. There is an estimated increase in GDP growth in 2021 by 2.6%, or I should say 2.6% in 2021, and 1.5% in both 2022 and 2023. So despite the era that we come out of, there is hope that we are going to change things around and the economy is going to grow going forward. 1.12 trillion in tax revenue will be generated in the year 2020. This is 304.1 billion below the budgeted tax revenue presented in February's budget. So this reduction means that the total revenue will decline by 17.3% year on year during the current years versus a budgeted increase of plus 5.1% at the time of the February 2020 budget. Now remember that during this time, our country has engaged in major borrowings as well. So these debts will have to be repaid. So we're looking at a more positive economic environment. It has a lot of debt to address post the pandemic. So just so that you know, the SME sector makes up 91% of formalized business and employs 60% of South Africa's workforce. It is certainly a force to reckon with. So you have many business ideas, and one of the key and first processes is to engage in what we call macro and micro screening. So macro screening is basically a helicopter's view, looking at it, or the business concept sitting in a helicopter. And the other is micro screening, a deep dive into each particular area. So this is a screening tool that we usually share with entrepreneurs who are at startup level. We ask them to list the project idea, and we ask them to rate various areas, some 5 areas. And the rating is from 1 to 5, with 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. So in this particular instance, I've used 2 examples, one, a coffee shop in this particular area, where market availability is sitting at 2, which is pretty fair. People are still afraid of going out, sitting in coffee shops due to the pandemic. Raw materials availability 4, which is very satisfactory. There are people looking for opportunities, so supply would be easier. We also looking at the technology available. Access to technology for a coffee shop may not be rocket science at this particular point in time, so we decided to call that a 4. Skills availability, yes, I think I have the skills to basically set up and run a coffee shop. I know how to take the concept to market. I know how to engage in customer service that would keep people coming. And in terms of government priority, it may not necessarily be government priority at this particular point in time, because there are new demands and needs that government has prioritized, and I'll talk to that in a few minutes. So I rated that at 2. The total score is 17, and if I look at the critical success factor, which is an average, we're sitting at 3.4. So if you look at online training, for example, you see that my rating is far higher because of the change in era, the dependency on communicating through a platform like Zoom and many others, which seems to be more viable at this particular point in time in order to, and in terms of government priority, in terms of technology available, my skills available, perhaps raw materials available. Yes, I have a computer, I have access to Wi-Fi, and I have a system that can easily take me in and out of these platforms. And market availability, yes, more people are looking at empowering themselves in various spaces in order to start regrouping, rethinking, re-strategizing to engage in some form of recovery, of financial recovery. I've rated that 4.8%. So I would call this my macro screening process. Then I would do a deep dive into each particular area and establish, if there is government priority, are there any limiting legislation that would prevent my business from operating? So this is just to give you a feel of the kind of tools that you could use in order to take your business idea to the next level of screening and honing them down to 1 or 2 critical ideas that you may eventually start researching and implementing. So here's a business startup checklist for you. Finding a good business idea is critical. Testing it in terms of macro screening and micro screening is more critical. Testing a business idea by doing market research. We would be able to give you information on field research techniques, how to gather data, how to analyze data, and how to make your decision. Writing a formal business plan, if you don't have the skills, you can engage somebody too. But one of the critical issues is that you must know what's inside that business plan. I really don't like doing business plans for companies because I feel that it is a process that they need to engage in. And what we've done is designed a very user-friendly business plan format that basically assists you. Is business plans only required for seeking funding? No, it is also required to help you follow a clear strategy from idea to implementation in a very structured way. Branding your business, this is critical. The success of your business depends on your brand. It is the most critical area. If you're not creditworthy, for example, you cannot engage in a business that would compromise yourself and your business because you're not creditworthy. Making it legal. There are different legal entities that you can engage in right now. CCs are no longer available. It would have to be a proprietary limited, or you could set up an NPC or a cooperative. Very many people like the cooperative idea because there's grant funding available. Those are the wrong reasons to enter into cooperatives. Cooperatives require a different kind of model. And it is very difficult to find committed people to be a part of a cooperative that would work and deliver equally and earn the remuneration that is required in the form of deserving earning. Getting funding only if you need it. Very often startup businesses feel the only way I can get off the ground is to get funding. Startup funding is a huge challenge, but the goalpost seems to have shifted with COVID-19, and I'm going to share that with you in a few seconds. So basically, if you look at startup funding, There's a lot of requirements that you need to put in place, and I'm going to cover that when I talk to you about the criteria for funding. Because it's startup, it's high risk. So generally, you would find that financing agencies are looking for offtake agreements, contracts that you can produce on the table to say, these companies will order from me, or I have an offtake agreement to produce so many units over a certain period of time, and I'm looking for capital to get this off the ground. I see now that they're actually accepting market studies. So you can actually present a market study to prove the marketability of the business or the product in order to secure startup funding. Setting up the business from beginning to end. What is the process flow in terms of production or in terms of service? And of course, talking to who the target market is, how would you reach them, etc. Marketing and launching your business. This is critical. You have all the social media platforms. And remember, when starting a business, don't assume that people are waiting for you to open your doors, to flood in and give you orders. Contrary to that, it's going to be a huge struggle. You need to have reserves for at least 6 months when starting a business, so that you could carry yourself and the business sufficiently until it starts generating income. Design a compelling pitch. This is critical. How you present your business, how you make, or how compelling you make it to the customer or client is very, very critical. And generally, there's some nice training around this to hone in and be quite cryptic in the presentation. Remember, people don't want to listen to long stories. They want you to get to the point. They want you to excite them. They want it to be very creative, innovative, and so on. Very importantly, start small, dream big. Start with what you have. You don't have to wait for that big loan to come through. Just keep going. Small strides, little milestones, and you're on your way. While it might seem like a lot to take on, using a checklist actually breaks it down into manageable, clear steps. So we say you have this huge elephant. One bite at a time gets you to eat the entire elephant. So one very critical tool that we still use is a Gantt chart. It was designed by Henry Gantt between 1910 and 1915. Can you imagine that? We still use it, where you list the activities and you map when you're going to achieve that in terms of a timeline over the months that you are starting the process of getting into business. So very importantly, there are other tools available as well. We have the logical framework approach. We have the objective setting, goal charts, and so on. So these are little tools that you could also access off the net in order to use in your planning process. So let's look at the components of a business plan. Essentially, business revolves around 4 critical principles. The product to service, which actually falls under market. So you have your marketing and sales plan, you have your production or sales plan, you have organization and management and financial planning. And of course, the executive summary is a snapshot of your business concept and what you plan to do. An overview of the company, including the legal status. Is it a PTY Ltd? Is it a cooperative? Identify your products or services very cryptically. Provide as much detail as possible. Remember, there are all sorts of personality types that would be looking at this particular opportunity or business plan. So, there are the dominant blue color energy people who would want more the technical information and detail. You would have the dominant red colored energy people who are very action oriented. So they want a very cryptic summary that would give them the essential information. Then you have the dominant yellow color energy people who are creative, innovative people. So the way in which you present your product or service must actually appeal to their creative, innovative nature as well. And then you have the dominant green color energy, which is basically people who are feeling oriented, emotions driven. What difference is it going to make to the planet, to my family? How is it going to help human beings and animals, for example? So the way in which you package your product or service description must be appealing to the different personality types. Marketing and sales plan, competitive edge, offtake agreements, marketing and sales plan indicate a competitive edge. You have to show that you have offtake agreements or contracts, and now they're allowing marketees. You would have other agencies in the province, in the country, like SEDA. These are government agencies. SEDA is linked to the Small Business Development Ministry. They offer non-financial services. So you could approach SEDA, for example, to assist you with the market study. They would assist you with covering the costs of that. And you can access about 3 or 4 projects, but it's on a diminishing payment scale where it's also on a cost sharing. So you can approach an organization like SEDA. Production and sales plan. What is the production process flow? What is the factory layout, etc.? Organization and management. What is the organizational structure of your company? Who's going to be the management team? And reflect their sector-specific knowledge and experience. What are the systems and procedures you're going to structure in your business in order to ensure efficiency and effectiveness and high quality products? Remember, quality management is a very, very key concept that falls under organization and management. Who are the suppliers? Who's going to supply you with your raw materials? What about the logistics? How are you going to get it to your factory floor, for example? If you're in a service-oriented business, of course, you're not talking raw material supplies in a big way. You're not talking factory layout, but you're talking process flow in terms of service delivery. So financial planning. What you need in your business plan is a cash flow projection based on a sales forecast that you would put together. You would need a projected profit and loss. You would need a personal balance sheet, because at this stage, at startup level, it's what you own that would be put on the table as collateral generally. Is the business viable? Is the business feasible? So when we spoke about your sector-specific knowledge and experience, remember, very, very importantly, that you may not have the knowledge and experience, or which I should say the experience of producing a certain product, but you may bring in people with the relevant skills that would impact on the business in a positive way. So, for example, very many engineering companies don't have the business owner with an engineering degree, but the business owner may employ qualified engineers in order to conduct the work. But the business owner must have the knowledge and understanding in order to facilitate relationships and be able to present the company in the appropriate way. So list the milestones and have an appendix of information that you can share. What are the funding avenues? So there are financing agencies. We call them development financial institutions who are linked to government. The ones that I'm about to mention are the first 4. You have SEFA, Small Enterprise Financing Agency, and they have different criteria to the National Empowerment Fund, and they have different criteria to the Industrial Development Fund, and they have different criteria to the National Youth Development Agency. The National Youth Development Agency has been predominantly providing grant funding to youth in specific sectors. And of course, if all of this fails, you can look for angel investors. This is the website where you can access angel investments, angel investors in South African. You can also self-fund. You may have family members who would be interested in investing in your business. You may be able to borrow finance from family members. Be sure to have proper contractual agreements with them and make payment according to that agreement. SEDA is the Small Enterprise Development Agency, again, a government agency. They offer non-financial support. So they assist you with business planning, for example. They would assist you with marketing materials, and they would assist you with more structured training and development in terms of getting started with your business. But remember, there are time delays with government agencies. So you may want to approach organizations like the University of Extended Learning if you want to get your project off the ground far sooner than later. Government incentives are currently available in the agro-processing phase, not for farming, but for processing the marula fruit into marula cream, for example. Automotive sector is a big sector, and a lot of incentives are available there. The Black Industrialist Scheme, this is targeted at those companies that require 30 million or more, and it's on a 50-50 cost sharing basis. So you get 50% grant and 50% input from yourself. So the Black Industrialist Scheme, I think in the past people have known it to be only targeted at existing businesses. That is now open to emerging businesses as well on a larger scale. So the minimum is actually 30 million in total. Pardon me. So business process services, these are your call centers, and it is primarily focused on attracting foreign contracts into the country for the call center business. COVID-19 relief and support to SMEs. So if you look at the debt relief finance scheme, I think for those of you who are in business, you were aware of this. It was put up by the Small Business Development Ministry, managed by the IDC and, managed by CIFA and CEDA. This is closed. Business Growth Resilience Facility is also closed. Spaza Shop Scheme. This is open with small grants available. Support for enterprises based in townships and villages. These are open, and there's certain criteria that you need to read up on. So if you get to our website, you would find all this information there. Priority sectors recently launched. I mentioned the automotive sector. I've mentioned the textile sector, bakers and confectioners, township and rural business. These are, and this is hot off the press. I got to speak to Mr. Tula Mkhonazi yesterday from CIFA. They're basically offering loans at prime less 5%. Prime is currently sitting at 7%, which means that the loans will be at 2%. Very attractive. And this is for startup businesses that is starting from scratch to existing businesses. And you stand a better chance if they are township-based or rural businesses. Manufacturing sector, part loan, part grant. The available fund is 350 million, and a maximum of 15 million per SME will be considered. So our focus in the country at the moment is on the manufacturing sector. Big emphasis, any form of manufacturing from startup to existing manufacturing businesses, there are funds available through CIFA, and CIFA is basically managing this. I want to quickly just mention to you the SPII, the Support Program for Industrial Innovation. It's basically focusing on the development phase of a business, which begins at the conclusion of basic research and ends when a pre-production prototype has been produced, predominantly, of course, for manufacturing businesses. I think you could also include IT software in that. And these are the contact details. You can also access this information off the net. TIA, Technology Innovation Agency, is another agency that focuses on innovation and creativity. They have the SEED Fund, the Technology Development Fund, the Commercialization Support Fund, and they actually fund the research that you need to engage in. You would also have startup incubators like, in the science and technology space. So you apply to be a part of the incubator, your concept is assisted, and you develop this whole initiative and end up with a product that you get assistance to get off the ground. Financing criteria: have to be a South African citizen, legally registered, operating in South Africa. You have to have a written proposal, a business plan, demonstrate the character and ability to repay the loan. This is very, very important. You provide personal and business credit references, agreements, cracks, market study to illustrate the need. Have the majority shareholder as the owner manager of the business. Where available, you can provide relevant securities or collateral and have a valid tax clearance certificate. So to conclude, I'd like to share with you the entrepreneur's credo. I do not choose to be a common woman or man. It is my right to be uncommon. If I can, I seek opportunity, not security. I want to take the calculated risk, to dream and to build, to fail and to succeed. I will never cower before any master, nor bend to any threat. It is my heritage to stand proud and unafraid, to think and act for myself, to enjoy the benefits of my creations, and to face the world boldly and say, this I have done. This is from I'm an Entrepreneur, Thomas Paine, 1776. how true. These words still ring true so many years later. My personal motto, doves don't fly where eagles soar. And I always leave people with the question that they have to answer for themselves. Are you going to be a dove that flies closer to the land? Are you going to be an eagle that soars far up into the sky? The choice is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all the best. I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who will then open the floor for questions.
Hey, thank you so much, Vani, for your presentation today. I do have a few questions coming through, but if anyone does have any questions, now's the time to either type up your questions or you can raise your hand and ask your question live. If you did enjoy what Vani had to say and you'd like to unpack more on each of these areas, you're welcome to contact either Cindy or Venosha. Their contact details are on the screen at the moment. So just in terms of the comments, I just have Debbie saying, so true, brilliant. I have a question from Ntokozini. Is it critical to have a business plan if you plan to venture into an entrepreneurial journey, including the acquisition of the franchise like a petrol station, as your products and services are defined and there is support on sales and marketing by the franchisor?
Great. And Tukazisi, I think that's a very important question. You do get support, extensive support from the franchisor, but it's always important to have your own strategy and your own plan as to how you're going to grow the business. And they give you the freedom to do that. So yes, very simple. Do have a business plan, put together your own strategy and follow that as much as possible.
Okay, I have another question from Fiona. Hi, Vani. Any opportunities and funding in the publishing industry? Thank you so much. It was outstanding.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm not certain. It's not a space that I'm familiar with, but I would suggest that you do contact CIFA or drop them an email. You get their contact details on their website. At the moment, publishing may be quite a big need due to the remote learning that's happening and due to the materials that are basically being produced for remote learning and remote documentation for remote studies. Yeah, so I would say, given the current environment, it may be a big need. Thank you, Fiona.
Okay. We also have a comment from Denise. She says, very informative session. Thank you so much, Vani. Sure, so many are coming through at the moment. Fiona says, thank you. I have a question from Dharma. Hi, Vani, thank you for the interesting presentation. Can you please tell us a bit more about branding your business? How does it work for a new startup? The entrepreneur matters more.
Right. It would be amiss of me if I tried to go in and explain that in more detail. My suggestion is that you do contact Sindiswa or Benusha to basically look at what opportunities there are available. Perhaps there's also online interventions, and this question could inform future webinars for UEL. But branding at this stage would be very online because that is the platform. It's important to have somebody with experience to structure your branding strategy. You could put something together, but always consult with somebody who has done this before and who's had success at it, or speak to other entrepreneurs. I think this is quite an interesting area that UEL should look at going forward because of the changing environment. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. I have a question from Prof. Ziska. Thank you. It's a comment. Thank you for a great and thought-provoking presentation with practical ideas and tips that can help people to become entrepreneurs. I also have a question from Sylvia. Hi, my company SL Fashions has applied for grant funding with CIFA, but no feedback. Who can we talk to? We also phone CIFA offices. No one is available to help. I don't know if you have any advice, Vani, on that.
Okay, Sylvia, I know that it is challenging times and very difficult to get hold of certain government agencies because they're all working remotely. Sylvia is a client of mine, so Sylvia, please send me an email and I'll forward it to the regional manager at CIFA so that we could try and get a response on your application. Thanks.
Okay, great. Cecily asked, hi, can you please share the slides? Love the slides from our ideation to implementation. So I will be uploading those slides on our website later this afternoon, and we will send out the link to that. Tembi says, hi, Vani, thank you for today. I have a business and would like to approach UKZN. What channels may I use? Maybe she's referring to KZN channels. I think maybe similar to what you said online.
Aha. Perfect. So Tembi, maybe you can be in touch with Sindiswa or Venusha.
Okay. So Fiona has a question. Vani, marketing a business is most challenging. Any tips?
It is, and I think very importantly, you need to start with who you're marketing to. And when we do run sessions on marketing, we basically ask you to understand your target market. And I know it's a little bit outdated when we talk about income segments. There are materials available online that would help you understand the classifications. You would also find information on, in terms of the classifications and income groups, where do they shop? What do they read? What radio stations do they listen to? What kind of platforms are they accessing online? And so on. So my suggestion is that you first hone in on the specific market segments that you're wanting to market to and understand and study their habits in terms of where they gather information from. It's also useful to have freebies. Remember, there are also online platforms like Take a Lot. And I was in one of their webinars and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. For a mere cost of 300 rands a month, you could get your product listed. And of course, there's additional charges on each sale, and it could be between 10 to 15%, depending on the type of product, etc. So you send your product to the warehouse and, it's of course only available to tangible products, not service-oriented kind of businesses. So these are some of the platforms you could explore at a very low cost. You can cut it off at any time you want with no long-term contracts and that kind of thing. Just test it out, try it out. And they would market your product by making it a deal a day or something like that. You run a special at 50% of the normal price, 20% off or whatever it is, and you get your product out there into the marketplace. Later on, once you're more established, you can look at creating your own online platform to start taking that market that you've already created away into your own space. So there's varying ways of marketing depending on the target market. And here I'm talking about a target market that would look at online shopping. There are certain target markets that wouldn't. Thanks. Over to you, Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Vani. I'm just going to launch the poll quickly before I go to the final questions and comments. So please do take a moment to rate our webinar for today. Fiona says thank you. Sylvia says thank you very much, Vani. And we appreciate the program, very informative. Cami says thanks, Vani. This was an awesome session, extremely helpful and useful. I do have a question from Ntoko Zizi. It's more of a studying question. So I'm going to ask if you could please direct your query either to Cindy or Venosha. It's about studying at UKZN. Then Judy Ann says, hi there, Vani. Thank you very much for today. It was most informative and helpful. And Sheila says, brilliant. Thanks, Vani. Connie says, thank you, ladies. The session was very informative. And Reshma says, thank you, Vani, for your wealth of knowledge shared. Okay, so I think that's about it for our Q&A. If you do have a question you'd like to ask, and we've unfortunately run out of time, you're welcome to send a query through when we send the email out this afternoon. There is an opportunity to provide feedback or questions, and we can always pass this on to Vani to answer for you. So thank you very much, Vani, for sharing today. I think you've encouraged many ladies to step out of their shells and venture into the entrepreneurship field. So also thank you to everyone for joining us today and engaging in our webinars. So as I mentioned, the video and the slides will be available on our website. So we'll be sending out this direct link as soon as it's ready, but it will be before the end of today. Please do take note of the upcoming webinars and do RSVP to secure your place. Next week, we'll be finalizing our Women's Month series with one more final topic on women leadership in the context of rapidly changing times. And this will be facilitated by Professor Pinky Mtembu from UKZN. And then we'll be starting a new series from September. The first two will be done by Marlon Moodley. I don't know if you attended his previous webinars. And the second two on the slide will be done by Professor Ziska Fields, who was actually in the audience today. So otherwise, we hope that you enjoyed the session today. Remember to go onto our website to RSVP, www.ukznextendedlearning.com. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. All the best, ladies and gentlemen.